Welcome back to my East Anglian model railway. Now I've been modelling for years and years, and since I moved to Suffolk about 25 years ago, I've been trying to build up a model railway based on East Anglia. And the biggest problem has been trying to find locomotives that would have run in that part of the world in the 1950s and 60s. The only ready-to-run available model for years has been the Hornby B12, and the original version, which dates back to the days of Triang, was okay. I don't have any problems with it, but it wasn't a particularly great runner, and for those who like extra realism, it wasn't a particularly detailed or accurate model. But in the last few years, Hornby have really come up trumps. They've produced a lot of newer models, some of which spent a lot of their time or originated in the East Anglian region. And first up here, we've got a D16, I think Claude Hamilton class was the original loco was called Claude Hamilton, something like that. And I'm just going to show you some of my recent models, I say recent, last 5 years or so, in action. And also I've been very lucky that just very recently I've managed to track down some kit-built models of much more obscure prototypes that have never been available ready to run. And they're a bit like London buses. I've waited years and searched eBay and train fares and things like that. Never seen any of them. And then just a few recently have come on the market. And of course I've snapped them up. And they've all been at reasonably good prices. Kit-built models can cost you £200 or £300. Unbuilt kits can cost that much by the time you've bought a motor and gears and wheels and so on. So I managed to pick them all up for well under £100 each. Might sound like a lot of money, but because of their obscurity, their sort of rare value, I'm really delighted with them. Anyway, let's just show you first of all how I'm actually controlling my models. My layout is set up for both digital and analog control. I've just tidied up my control panel recently. On the left, you can just see a very simple Hornby Select controller. It does everything I want it to do. On the right, there is a Gauge Master 2-track controller. It's got what they call a simulator switch on it, which means that the power supply, when you turn it up, well, I'll show you in a minute, when you have the simulator on, the power supply slowly gives power to the locomotive, and when you turn the power off, the locomotive will coast and gradually slow down, and you can apply the brake to stop it a bit more quickly. None of my locomotives, my Great Eastern locomotives that is, are digitally controlled. None of them have got a chip inside them, so they're all going to be running on the analog controller. I've set the brakes to go, I've taken off the brakes, and I'm now going to turn the power supply up to about 70%, and my locomotive slowly pulls out of the station. 70% might be a bit too much. Behind the Hornby D16 is a Gresley four-wheel full brake, or pigeon van I think it's called, followed by 3 Ian Kirk corridor coaches. They are the shorter 52-foot coaches that were built purely for the Great Eastern region by the LNER because of the tighter curves and clearances on some of the stations. Yeah, the four-wheel brake is a Chivers kit, and as I said, the coaches are Ian Kirk. They're very difficult to come by these days. Track, I have another Hornby locomotive, the B12. This is one of the more recent models, the super detailed model, and this one I believe was based in the Ipswich shed back in the 1950s or 60s, 1950s, and Ipswich is meant to be roughly the station I'm modelling. So, although of course it's just a super quick station building, it's nothing like Ipswich in reality. Okay, let's see the B12 in action. I'll use the same controller again, just easing off the brake and letting the power go. And this one is pulling a selection of Hornby BR Mark 1 and Gresley coaches. Next locomotive up is an LNER J20, formerly Great Eastern, basically the most powerful freight locomotive the Great Eastern had, rated at 5F, which for an 060 is pretty powerful, and in marked contrast to the Hornby J15, which you'll see in a minute, the J20 is a bit of a beast. Now this is a white metal kit, originally McGowan models, I think. It's got a brass chassis. I bought it second hand, so I didn't build it. But it's been built very well. The only problem is that because of the long wheelbase, the centre wheels have had to be unflanged, so it only picks up from the front and rear drivers. And I need to fit pickups to the tender. Unfortunately, the tender wheels are plastic, and it's been built in such a way that I can't actually get them out. So I'm wondering if I'm going to have to use a Hornby B12 tender or something like that. It's the same, it's exactly the same model of tender, but I'm wondering if I'm going to have to use a B12 and use the pickups from that, or get an old Triangle Hornby B12 tender and fit metal wheels to that. But the white metal tender, the only way I can get new wheels into that is if I sort of take the whole thing apart, because it's been built in that way. Okay, let's see it in action. Next locomotive up is an LNER F4. Well, I think it's an F4 rather than an F5 or an F6. A 242 tank. Just get a sideways view of it there. They were nicknamed gobblers because they got through a lot of coal. They were a bit thirsty on the old coal to regenerate steam, and I think that's an appropriate name for the model as well, because it's got an old Hornby XO4 motor in it, and it uses quite a lot of electricity. It takes a lot of power to get it going, and my Gauge Master controller is up to the task, but it takes a lot more. You have to turn it up a lot higher for it to start moving. Anyway, because it's in LNER livery, and I do love the lined red of the LNER black passenger livery, because it's in LNER livery, I've put it with 3 LNER teak coaches. These are the Hornby Thompson suburban coaches, so they're sort of fake teak, but they do look rather smart. And let's get this one going. Now the F4 model, I think it might be made by Alan Gibson or by Falcon Brassworks, but I'm not absolutely sure. When it came, it had only 2 pickups on each side. So with only 2 pickups on each side, it really needed extra to get it to run really smoothly. I'm really pleased with how it runs. I added an extra couple of pickups to the rear pony wheels. I could add some to the front pony wheels too. But to be honest, so far I haven't found that necessary. It can slow down fairly smoothly It's a bit noisier than obviously some modern ready-to-run locos, but I think that's partly the brass body. The brass body is so sort of rigid, and the metal itself is so thin, it acts like a bit of a sound box and resonates with the sound of the motor. But just to show you, we can get a reasonably smooth start out of it. Not perfect, but pretty good. And I think it looks really nice with the teak coaches behind. This is the noisiest bit of track on my layout, so it's going to make a loud noise as it goes past. But that's down to I've got track, hard ballasted directly onto a chipboard there.